The moment the police sirens echoed through the quiet village jungle, everyone stopped what they were doing. Birds scattered into the sky. Children froze mid-step. Even the wind felt like it paused. People whispered the same question under their breath: what happened this time? A woman stood near the dirt road, arms crossed, anger burning across her face. The villagers knew her well. She always believed she was right. Today, she pointed toward a young man standing calmly near the tree line, dressed simply, almost like an ordinary traveler. But there was something about him, something controlled, confident, quiet. "That's him," she shouted as the police vehicle stopped. "He's hunting here, right near our village. Arrest him before he hurts someone." The officers stepped out, alert but cautious. The village jungle was protected land, and illegal hunting was a serious crime. Everyone leaned closer, expecting a dramatic arrest. But the young man didn't run. He didn't argue. He simply watched. The lead officer approached. "Sir, we received a report. Do you have permission to be here?" The villagers held their breath. The woman smirked, convinced she had won. The young man slowly reached into his pocket. For a moment, tension rose. Even the officers stiffened. But instead of anything threatening, he pulled out a small leather wallet and handed over a card. The officer's expression changed instantly. His eyebrows lifted. Then his posture straightened. The second officer glanced at the card too, and his face showed the same shock. The crowd murmured. Something felt wrong. Or maybe, completely unexpected. The woman stepped forward, confused. "Well, are you arresting him or not?" The lead officer cleared his throat and looked at her carefully. "Ma'am, do you realize who this is?" She blinked. "Just a hunter breaking rules." The officer shook his head slowly. The young man finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "I'm here under official authorization. But I think there's been a misunderstanding." The air shifted. The villagers exchanged nervous looks. The confident woman's face lost some of its certainty. What none of them knew yet, what was about to turn this ordinary complaint into a village-wide shock, was that the man she accused was connected to the very laws she thought she was defending. And the truth was only beginning to unfold. The silence that followed felt heavier than the jungle air. The villagers watched the officers carefully, trying to understand why their confidence had suddenly changed. A few people stepped closer, whispering to each other, while the woman who called the police stared in disbelief. This wasn't going the way she imagined. The lead officer handed the identification back with both hands, almost respectfully. The young man accepted it calmly, as if this scene was familiar to him. He showed no pride, no anger, only patience. That calmness made the crowd even more curious. "Sir," the officer said, lowering his voice, "we didn't know you were scheduled to be here today." The woman's eyes widened. "Scheduled? What do you mean scheduled?" She interrupted. "He was carrying hunting equipment. That's illegal here." The second officer turned toward her gently. "Ma'am, please let us handle this." But she refused to back down. "I live here. I know these forests better than anyone. He was sneaking around. I saw him." The young man finally looked at her directly. "I wasn't sneaking," he said softly. "I was tracking." "Tracking what?" someone from the crowd asked. He paused for a moment, scanning the trees as if listening to something only he could hear. "A problem," he replied. That answer created more questions than it solved. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. Rumors started instantly. Wild animals, illegal. Hunters, hidden dangers. The jungle had always held secrets, and now the tension felt real. The lead officer addressed the crowd. "Everyone calm down. There's no immediate danger." But the woman folded her arms tighter. "Then why is he armed?" The young man breathed out slowly. "Because sometimes protection looks different from what people expect." The crowd fell quiet again. One older villager stepped forward. "Young man, who exactly are you?" Before he could answer, the lead officer spoke first. "He's working with the wildlife authorities." A ripple of surprise spread through the group. The woman's confident expression cracked. "That can't be right," she muttered. "He looks like an ordinary hunter." The young man gave a small, almost amused smile. "That's usually the point." The jungle wind moved through the trees, carrying a low rustling sound. The officers glanced toward the forest instinctively. Something about their body language hinted that this visit was more serious than anyone realized. The woman looked between the officers and the young man, frustration turning into confusion. She had expected applause, maybe gratitude, not silence and uncertainty. And just when the crowd thought the drama was ending, the officer received a message over his radio. His face went pale. He looked toward the jungle. Then at the young man. "Sir, we may have a situation." The young man's calm expression vanished for the first time. Whatever was happening inside that forest was bigger than a simple complaint, and the village was about to find out the truth. The radio crackled again, louder this time, filling the tense silence with broken words and urgency. The lead officer stepped aside to listen carefully, his expression tightening with every second. The villagers watched him nervously, while the young man fixed his eyes on the dense jungle ahead, already alert. "What happened?" the woman asked, her voice softer now. The officer lowered the radio slowly. "There's movement deeper inside the forest, signs of illegal activity," he said. A wave of whispers spread through the crowd. Illegal activity? In their jungle? The young man immediately adjusted the strap across his shoulder and began checking his equipment. His calm confidence returned, but this time it felt sharper, focused. The officers stepped closer, almost waiting for his direction. The woman frowned. So, he wasn't the problem. No one answered. One villager spoke quietly. "If he's wildlife authority, then why didn't he say so earlier?" The young man turned slightly. "Because people usually listen less when they think someone has power," he said. "I wanted to observe first." The words stung more than anyone expected. The jungle suddenly felt different, darker, heavier. The air buzzed with unseen tension. Birds had gone quiet, and even the insects seemed to pause. The lead officer addressed the crowd. Everyone should return to their homes. It might not be safe here. But curiosity kept them rooted in place. The woman looked at the young man again, her confidence completely gone. I thought you were breaking the law," she said quietly. He nodded. "You did what you thought was right." That simple response surprised her. There was no anger, no sarcasm, only honesty. Another officer approached him. "Sir, do you want backup called in?" The young man considered for a moment. "Not yet," he replied. "If it's who I think it is, too many people could scare them deeper into the jungle." The villagers exchanged confused glances. Who exactly was he talking about? The officer lowered his voice. "You mean poachers?" The young man's eyes narrowed slightly. "Maybe. Or something worse." That sentence sent a chill through everyone listening. Suddenly, a distant sound echoed from inside the trees, a sharp metallic clang, unnatural and alarming. The officers instinctively reached for their radios. The young man turned toward the sound instantly, his body tense like someone trained for moments like this. The woman stepped back, fear replacing her earlier anger. "What was that?" The young man didn't answer. Instead, he looked at the lead officer. "Keep them back," he said firmly. Then, without hesitation, he started walking toward the jungle. The officers hesitated, then followed. The villagers watched in stunned silence as the group disappeared between the trees. The woman stood frozen, realizing that her call to the police had opened something far bigger than a simple misunderstanding. And inside that jungle, hidden from everyone's sight, a dangerous truth was waiting, one that would change how the village saw this quiet stranger forever. The jungle swallowed the sound of their footsteps as they moved deeper between towering trees. Sunlight barely touched the ground now, broken into thin beams that shifted with every movement. The air smelled of damp earth and tension. The officers followed closely behind the young man, who walked with calm precision, scanning every detail around him. "Sir," one officer whispered, "are you sure we should go further without backup?" He paused briefly, listening. "If we move too loudly, they'll disappear," he replied. "We need to be careful." Behind them, at the edge of the forest, the villagers waited anxiously, watching shadows move between branches. The woman who called the police couldn't take her eyes off the path. She felt a heavy knot in her stomach. This was not the outcome she expected when she made that phone call. Inside the jungle, the group stopped suddenly. The young man crouched near the ground and pointed silently. Broken branches, boot prints, a small metal wire stretched between trees. The officers exchanged worried looks. "Traps," one officer whispered. The young man nodded. "Fresh ones." The realization hit hard. This wasn't random hunting. Someone had been planning something serious here. A distant movement caught his attention, a flicker between bushes. He raised his hand, signaling everyone to freeze. The jungle became completely silent. Then they heard voices. Low, careful, hidden. The officers slowly prepared themselves, but the young man leaned closer and whispered, "Wait." He listened longer, studying the direction of the voices. His expression hardened as if confirming something he feared. "Poachers," he said quietly. "Professional." One officer frowned. "How do you know?" He gave a short answer. "Because I've tracked them before." That single sentence revealed more than he intended. The officers realized this wasn't just a routine assignment for him, this was personal experience. He knew this world better than anyone there. They moved slowly toward the sound until they spotted figures in the distance, unloading equipment near a hidden clearing. Metal cages, tools, quiet laughter. The officers stared in disbelief. The operation looked organized, almost military. The young man whispered, "We can't rush in. They'll run, or worse, start a fight." One officer nodded nervously. "What's the plan?" He thought for a moment. "We observe first. Then we move fast." Back at the village, the waiting crowd grew restless. The woman paced nervously. She replayed everything in her mind. The accusation, the confidence, the shock on the officers' faces. She realized she knew nothing about the man she tried to expose. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from deep within the forest. The villagers gasped. Birds exploded into the sky. Inside the jungle, the young man's eyes widened. Something had gone wrong. "Now," he shouted. The officers surged forward, and as the hidden group realized they were discovered, chaos erupted. Shouts, movement, and the sound of footsteps racing through the trees. The quiet jungle turned into a battlefield of pursuit. The young man ran ahead, determination burning in his eyes, while the officers followed, unaware that the biggest revelation was still waiting to surface. The jungle erupted into chaos. Branches snapped under heavy footsteps as the poachers scattered in different directions. The officers shouted commands, trying to spread out and block escape routes, but the terrain made everything difficult. Thick vines and uneven ground slowed them down. Only the young man moved with certainty, weaving through the forest as if he knew every inch of it. "Left side," he shouted, pointing toward a narrow trail. Two officers followed immediately, trusting his instinct without question. One poacher stumbled over a root and dropped a metal bag that spilled tools onto the ground. The sharp sound echoed through the trees. Another tried to disappear deeper into the jungle, but the young man cut across the path, forcing him to turn back toward the officers. The chase felt endless, fast breaths, pounding footsteps, and adrenaline filling the air. Back in the village, everyone waited anxiously. The woman stood silently now, her earlier confidence completely gone. The villagers could hear faint shouting from inside the jungle, and each sound made their fear grow stronger. "What's happening in there?" someone asked. No one knew. Inside the forest, the young man finally caught sight of the group's leader, a tall figure moving quickly with practiced skill. The man glanced back, shocked to see someone keeping up with him. "You again," the poacher muttered angrily. The young man's eyes narrowed. "This ends today." The words stunned one of the officers close enough to hear. They knew each other. The poacher tried to run again, but the young man moved faster, cutting him off and forcing him toward an open clearing where the officers surrounded him. Within seconds, the group was secured. Heavy breathing filled the silence that followed. One officer shook his head in disbelief. "This operation, it's bigger than we thought." The young man nodded. "They've been moving through villages quietly for months." Another officer looked at him carefully. "How did you know exactly where they'd be?" He hesitated. For a moment, only the wind answered. Then he spoke softly. "Because I've been tracking this network for a long time." The officers exchanged glances, realizing they were standing beside someone far more experienced than they imagined. As they escorted the captured men back toward the village, the crowd gasped. No one expected to see handcuffed poachers emerging from the jungle. The woman stepped back, shocked. Her eyes moved from the arrested men to the young man leading the officers. The lead officer finally addressed the villagers loudly. These individuals were running illegal wildlife operations. Thanks to official monitoring, they've been caught. The crowd erupted with whispers. Someone asked the question everyone was thinking. Who is he? The lead officer turned toward the young man, respect clear in his voice. This man, he announced, isn't just a visitor. He's the senior wildlife chief assigned to this region. A stunned silence spread across the village. The woman's face turned pale. She realized she had called the police on the very person protecting their jungle. The young man looked at her calmly. No anger, no victory, just quiet understanding. And in that moment, the real lesson of the day began to settle over the village. The jungle grew quiet again as the sun began to set, painting the sky in warm orange light. The chaos from moments earlier faded into a strange calm, but the mood in the village had changed completely. The officers escorted the arrested men toward their vehicles while villagers watched in silence, still trying to process what they had witnessed. The young man stood near the edge of the forest, cleaning dirt from his hands. His expression wasn't proud or triumphant, just thoughtful. He looked more like a guardian than a hero, someone used to working quietly without applause. The woman who had called the police walked forward slowly. Her earlier confidence had disappeared, replaced by hesitation. The entire village noticed her approaching, and whispers followed her steps. She stopped a few feet away. "I didn't know," she said softly. "I thought you were doing something wrong." The young man nodded calmly. "You acted on what you believed," he replied. "Protecting your home isn't wrong." His answer surprised everyone. There was no blame in his voice. She swallowed nervously. "But I judged you without asking." He smiled slightly. "That happens more often than you think." The lead officer joined them and addressed the villagers. "Today could have gone very differently," he said. "Because of this operation, a dangerous wildlife network has been stopped." The crowd murmured with relief and pride. Suddenly, the young man they had doubted felt like someone they could trust. An elder villager stepped forward. "Why didn't you tell us who you were from the beginning?" The young man looked toward the jungle. "Sometimes," he said, "the best way to understand a place is to see it without people changing their behavior." The villagers nodded slowly, beginning to understand. Children gathered nearby, staring at him with curiosity rather than fear. He crouched down slightly, speaking gently. "This jungle belongs to all of us," he told them. "But it needs care, patience, and respect." The woman listened closely, feeling the weight of her mistake but also something else, respect. She realized that the real lesson wasn't about being right or wrong. It was about listening before assuming. As the police vehicles prepared to leave, the lead officer shook the young man's hand. "Thanks for trusting us," he said. He nodded. "Thanks for showing up." The villagers watched as the wildlife chief prepared to head back into the forest one last time. Someone asked, "Will you come back?" He smiled. "I never really leave," he said, glancing at the trees. The jungle wind moved gently again, peaceful now. The woman looked at the forest, then back at him. "Next time," she said quietly, "I'll ask questions first." He gave a small nod of approval. And as the sun disappeared behind the trees, the village understood something powerful. The person they feared was actually their protector all along.
From that day, jungle, whenever someone mentioned the jungle, they remembered the viral twist that turned accusation in respect and a lesson no one would ever forget. If you enjoyed the, don't forget to subscribe to Karen Universe, share with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments.